If I could have everyone's attention, please, we'll call this meeting of the Amarillo Local Government Corporation to order here on Wednesday, May 16th, 2012. I would note for the record that there is a quorum of the body here in order for us to conduct business. I want to welcome the board members who are now stuffing themselves or cleaning up after having spilled something in their shirts. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here and your continuing involvement and dedicated work to the corporation. Also would like to thank our visitors that are here today. We welcome you and appreciate your attendance here today as well. The first item of business for the body is the consideration of the approval of the minutes from our previous meeting on March 21st, 2012. Board members, you were provided electronically copies of those minutes in your packet late last week. If there are no additions, corrections, or deletions to those minutes, I would entertain a motion that they be approved.
So moved.
Second. Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the approval of the minutes as prepared for the March 21st, 2012 meeting indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries and the minutes stand approved. What we would like to do next, the board does need to spend a brief few moments, and I will underline the word brief, in closed session with our legal counsel at this stage of the meeting. And so we'll do that now, and so you all don't go very far, because it will only be, I'm guessing, about 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, and we will conduct the majority of our meeting in open public session, but we need a few minutes to receive some communication from our legal counsel. So bear with us as we work through that portion of the meeting, and then we'll call you back in and move on through the agenda today. The meeting portion of today's Local Government Corporation's Board of Directors, it is 12:16 p.m. We will now move to item number 3 on the agenda, which is a presentation and discussion of the proposed downtown convention center hotel and parking garage lease and development agreement as has been negotiated by the Local Government Corporation's Document Committee and Wallace Bajali Development Partners. The agreement defines the necessary terms and conditions and requirements of the proposed hotel and parking garage, its construction and operation, per both the February 15th, 2011 Master Developer Agreement and the August 23rd action of the Amarillo City Commission back in 2011. What I would like to do in order for this discussion to begin would be to ask our committee's in-house attorney, Richard Brown, who has very ably participated in the work of the Document Development Committee in the work over the last several months in working through this document, to walk both the board and the public, all of us, through the major high points of the document, along with Mr. Norris's help, and then we'll have questions and answers from the board and also from the public. Richard.
We've been charged to put together a public-private partnership to help serve as a catalyst for downtown development, and the documents that we are going to consider today are central to that effort. In order to go through them and get in mind what it is we're trying to accomplish, I think we have to first kind of turn back to fundamentals, and that's why are we doing this? And I think it's because it's our turn to make some things happen. If you look back over the history of the community, we saw the Potter County Courthouse get built during the Great Depression, and every decade something great has happened for Amarillo, and it's our turn to make something happen. The public sector can do some things well and some things not so well, and I would suggest running a hotel is something the public sector probably shouldn't be doing. And on the other hand, the private sector has a difficult time making things happen downtown because the cost is a little higher, and in particular in our community because the city owns so much of the ground downtown that you need a partnership to pull this together. So here we are trying to pull these two together, the private sector and the public sector, and to do that, the structure of the deal that is brought before the board today is driven by putting those partners together and making this happen. And so the structures a little hard to follow if we don't keep our fundamental objectives in mind. From the public's perspective, on the hotel and on the parking garage, what we want is a nice hotel. And we want it to stay nice. And we want it across the street from the Civic Center. What the public doesn't want is the financial risk of building that hotel or the financial risk.
May I interrupt you, Learned Counsel? When you speak of public, and this is for those in the audience as well as my little peanut brain, public means the city.
Public means the city, but we have partners in this working through this corporation who are all going to be contributing. So I'm using public in a little broader context to say, what does the non-private sector want out of this? And so as we want a nice hotel, we want it to stay nice, and we don't want the financial risk of building the thing or operating the thing, and we don't want the hassle of operating. And Wallace Pajali is agreeing to give us what we want. And that's the crux of what we want. And then on the other hand, we have to look at Wallace Pajali and satisfy what it is they want out of the deal. And what they want is, they want the land on which to build the hotel. And we have a joint interest here because we want that hotel to be right across the street from the city. So Wallace Pajali wants some land. Wallace Pajali wants some help on the streetscape cost. They want some help on reduction of their own taxes from their own hotel. And they want us to undertake some additional catalysts for growth. We will push ahead and try to get the MPEP done and continue to promote downtown. So how are we going to get to them what they want? The LGC, this corporation, as a funnel for the city of Amarillo, for the tiers, Center City of Amarillo, Downtown Amarillo Inc., the cooperation of our local utilities, with TxDOT, with the ADC work on the MPEP site, are all coming together to give Wallace Pajali what they want. And that's the essence of our deal. So we have documentation then to make that happen, which turns out to be fairly complex because we have all these multiple parties, we have multiple funding sources for multiple projects. And it actually turns out to be fairly simple for us because the LGC is mostly just contracting with our master developer, Wallace Pajali. Wallace Pajali is going to have to turn around and contract with a whole host of others to build this thing, design this thing, operate this thing. But we mostly just interface with Wallace Pajali. We save them some pain and suffering because we are helping to organize the public sector behind us, Center City, Tiers, City of Amarillo. And so the interface between the public and private sector is here. So, in broad terms, I think the deal is pretty favorable. You know, when Kennedy said in 1962, let's put a man on the land by the end of the decade, if he could have made the deal that all he had to provide was the land at Cape Canaveral and the land for NASA, and somebody else would come up with the people that knew how to do it, and they would build a facility, and they'd fire off the rocket, put the man on the moon, I think we would have taken that deal.
That's the first time I've heard him use that.
All right, so let's look then at the documents that we're going to try to, in 72,000 words or less, say all that. There are multiple parts, and we'll start by going through the smaller documents, and they're mainly the pieces and parts that we have to gather up on our side, the local government corporation, and bring to the table to do our part in this deal. The first one is the prime lease or the ground lease, the spot on the ground where everything's going to go. There will be a document between this corporation, LGC, and the City of Amarillo, which will get the land across to the LGC so that we in turn can lease the same land to Wallace Pajali. This lease, the city will effectively be providing us with a green field. Here it is, it's ready for somebody to build something on it. And then we'll be turning around and leasing that to Wallace Pajali. The lease is for a very long term. It's for 80 years because this hotel is going to last a long time. And to incentivize Wallace Pajali to build a rocket ship and go to the moon, they've got to have plenty of time to make it work for them economically. There's a little bit of, there's going to be a laydown on the parking garage site, and then we may have to spill over at some point if there's a timing issue between the parking garage and the hotel. But what we will have as a prime lease is the ground from the city, and then we'll flip it to Wallace Pajali. Then there are 4 principal economic incentive agreements. The first one has to do with the streetscape, and it's from our partner, Center City, Inc. Center City, Inc. has agreed to contribute $400,000 towards making this happen. That's the result of hundreds of volunteer hours and lots of Cokes and beers being drunk and all the dollars being saved for 10 years to come up with those dollars to contribute to this project. So there will be an agreement, and that is between Center City, Inc. and with us, the LGC. Center City, Inc. will give us the $400,000 conditioned on it going into the streetscape. We will make the deal with Wallace Pajali to build the streetscape, and then when it's done, pay them the money. The second agreement is also focused on streetscape. That is with the tiers. The agreement is between the Tiers Board and this board, the Local Government Corporation. Tiers has agreed by resolution last August, I believe it was, to provide $2.7 million toward the streetscape around these projects. So that money will be paid into LGC, and then as the installation occurs, LGC will pay it out to Wallace Pajali. The third agreement is the property tax rebate. This is a direct agreement between Tiers and Wallace Pajali. We, LGC, will not be a party to that agreement. It is close to what is a reasonably standard form of agreement that the Tiers has used in the past, which basically says if you will build a facility and the taxes go up, and you pay your taxes, then we will hand back to you 90% of the taxes you just paid. We don't know how much money that will be or won't be because the amount of the tax base is uncertain. It's possible that it's a non-taxable facility. It is also probable that the taxes would only be on the leasehold interest. So this is not likely to be a significant piece in terms of size of property. And then the fourth economic incentive agreement is the hotel occupancy and state sales tax rebates. The parties to this are Wallace Pajali, the city, and the state of Texas. We, the LGC, are not directly a party to that. Under this agreement, after Wallace Pajali pays their hotel an occupancy tax and sales taxes generated by this hotel, then it gets a rebate of the state's portion of the hotel and sales tax from their hotel for a period of 10 years. And then the city will rebate the local hotel and occupancy tax for a period of 20 years for up to 40% of construction cost, whichever occurs first. And that's also from this hotel. So it is just, they build the hotel, there's taxes, we're giving them their taxes back as an incentive. Okay, so these agreements collectively put us, the LGC, in position to do what the LGC is supposed to do under the hotel lease and development agreement, which is the big agreement and the one that we've mostly been focused on, and the one that's taken us so long to get finished. Turning to the terms and provisions of the big agreement, first, to understand what we're accomplishing, you have to remember that this agreement serves multiple purposes. It is first a construction agreement. We've got to get the hotel and the parking garage built. So you have provisions in it that have to do with build this thing. It is second, a lease of the hotel and the parking garage back to Wallace Pajali. So this is city-owned, but it's being built by Wallace Pajali. So you have the construction phase of go out there and build it. And then after it's built, it's got to be leased back to them. And so it's a lease of the hotel and the parking garage. And then finally, once it's leased back to them, you have to have an agreement for how is it going to be operated and maintained for the 80-year term of this agreement. So all of those things are being accomplished in this one document, which is one of the reasons why it's so long and complex. All right, so if that's what we're doing, who is doing this? Who are the parties? And the parties to this agreement are us, our corporation, local government corporation, which is called landlord in the document. And the other principal party is Wallace Pajali Development Partners, LP, the tenant. We will end up with some other folks over there because they may have some subtenants. They may have retail shops and so on. But as between us, landlord and tenant, we are almost totally 100% interface with just Wallace Pajali. Those are the parties. Now let's talk a minute about the what we want part. And this is focused on the project specifications. You remember what we want is a nice hotel. It's going to be nice for a long time. So how do we know we're going to get a nice hotel? Well, first of all, we know they're going to have to spend a lot of money. So they're going to have to be really stupid if it's not going to be pretty nice, because there's a lot of money going to go into this thing. But that's not enough. We've all seen some expensive houses that we didn't think were very nice. And so we have spent a lot of time searching for appropriate standards on which we would all agree it is a nice hotel. And so from our perspective, this is one of the more important parts of the agreement, which is to define what it is we're getting. And the essence of that is a 4-diamond hotel. There are multiple sort of indexes out there as to how you define this. It's also by reference to some existing hotels. And most of you made a trip or two and saw the comparable hotels. So we have physically looked at the kind of hotel we think we're going to get, and we've looked at an index of how you describe this hotel. And then we have put in some standards about how many rooms and how many square feet of meeting space. So in terms of, are we getting a nice hotel? That's the essence of the agreement for us. Similarly, the project specifications for the garage, to be sure we're getting what we intend to get. It's principally driven by how many parking spaces are we going to get out of this unit. And that is 841 spaces, with 300 of those spaces reserved to the hotel for guests and for their retail shops over there. And then there is 40,000 square feet that may be designated for retail on the first level. So we know how big the thing's going to be, we know how many cars can be parked, and it will be configured in accordance with drawings and specifications, which we will approve later as part of the process. That is the build it nice. Then it is, we want it to stay nice. How do we know we're going to get what we want on that part? And these are the operating standards. As this long-term agreement plays out, how do we know it will stay nice? Again, there are some external industry standards that we can call upon, and that's the 4-diamond rating again. And then we have some other language in the agreement that ties it back to the comparable hotels you've seen and requires them to go forward on the same basis. The only place it gets a little dicey or a little difficult for us is, what if 60 years from now, nice means something different from what nice means today? We can't make them go back and rebuild the hotel. It's going to be built in the next couple of years. And then it is what it is. And so 60 years from now, I don't know, you need a heliport over on the pool deck. We cannot require them to build a heliport 60 years from now. But other than sort of structurally rebuild the hotel, we can keep them to this standard throughout the long term of this lease.
So I mean, they have to buy new mattresses every now and then?
Yes. Okay. We got them on that. Okay. Let's shift our thought a little bit now to what it is Wallace Pajali wants and what is in this agreement to give it to them. And recall it is the land, the property. So what's in the document that you have reviewed are Block 5883, the land we all know what we're talking about across the street. And I think the only part that's still open is exactly how 6th Street will be configured running through that property, but the rest of it we've resolved where the land is and what part they are taking for the project. I think next thing that Wallace Pajali wants out of this is a term. If they're going to spend $70 million building a hotel, they want a chance to get their money back. They want a chance to be able to sell it to the next guy. He wants a chance to get his money back and to sell it to the next guy, and so on. And so keep in mind, we're not paying to build this hotel. So it's okay with us for them to make money. We'll be very happy for them if they make money. But they need a term to do it, and that's why it's built in that there's an 80-year term on this deal. Another thing that Wallace Pajali needs for this to work is to know that they have an adequate opportunity to make this work without the city competing against them. They've just spent $70 million to build a hotel. They want a shot to make this work without the city starting the next day to build a hotel right next door to compete against them. So in this agreement, there is a 20-year clause. It's a non-competition agreement, which cuts both ways. The city's not going to build a comparable hotel right downtown to compete against them, and they are not going to build another hotel right downtown to compete against it, because it is in our mutual interest for this facility to work. Those are the broad deal points that are in the document before you. Now let's turn for a minute and talk about the conditions to construction commencement. Once you start turning dirt, that's when you know you've really got everything lined up. And there are a number of things that have to come into place before that happens. There are things that Wallace Pajali has to do, and there are things that we, the LGC, have to do. Wallace Pajali has to come and get approval of the budget, approval of the project schematic, approval of their financing commitments, approval of the draw schedule, approval of the construction contract, design contract, and other agreements. So this whole cast of contracts that has to come into place, the LGC has its moment to look at those and say, yes, this is consistent with our deal. Let's go forward. And then on the LGC side, what is it we have to do in order to pull the trigger, and it is now time to commence construction? Mostly it is to get those agreements that I talked about at the very beginning. Get the prime lease, get the Center City agreement, the 2 tiers agreements, the city document, get all those agreements in place. And then lastly, we have to have something worked out as between AADC and Coke with respect to the ground south of the Civic Center. It is not dependent on completion of that, but the execution of that deal to the point that they have reasonable assurance it's going to happen. Now, there are a couple of others that are important. Wallace Bajali has to have closed the construction financing. The big question, do they have the money? Yeah, you have to have the money before we commence. Wallace Bajali has to escrow its equity contribution. Recall there is an equity component where they're coming with their dollars, and they will escrow that with their lender. So the money's there before we start. And then on our side, the city financing has to be in place for the parking garage. That all happens, we get started. How does this play out? The document has to address the construction schedule and how will this play out. Those specific dates are dates that we just received this morning, so they haven't been plugged into the document that we have in front of you. Those have been negotiated, and we have an agreement on all those. We just didn't have time to get them in the paper this morning. And we will have a projected timeline later to look at for how this is expected to play out over the construction phase. But broadly speaking, keep in mind, it is their $70 million. It is their hotel. They are way more incentivized than us to get it done right, and get it done in a hurry. So, yes, we don't want it hanging forever, but the deal is structured so they are terrifically incentivized to get it done on their own. So now let's say we've got the thing done, it's built. So now we're in the operational phase. What's in this agreement that is particularly relevant? First, let's talk for a moment about rent. And you have to remember that for us, this is almost like a free hotel. They spent the $70 million to do it. So we're not in this for rent from our side. We're in this to get a hotel built on that spot right over there. So there will be some rent, and there will be an initial $2.24 million coming out of their equity money that is effectively going across the street into the parking garage and the MPIP part of this deal that's going to be the follow-on. There is also another component, which is $360,000 a year for the original life of the revenue debt. It's estimated to be about 23 years. And this concept is basically tied to the operator, master developer, has 300 slots in that parking garage that are dedicated to them. So we want them to help pay for that garage. And so that's the $360,000 coming across to pay. So why doesn't that go on forever for the 80 years? Because if you think about it, logically at some point those parking slots are paid for. And this number is intended to roughly reflect, yes, you bought and paid for your 300 slots. And that's when the money stops and the 360 no longer comes across to us. remember that built into this deal is that Wallace Bajali has to operate and maintain the facilities. So they're the ones that are going to have to take care of that parking garage. They're the ones that are going to have to keep it up. All right, so we're up and running. Things are working swell. Our lease is in place. What happens when there is a change, a transfer, something happens, Wallace Bajali is out, somebody else is in? We can have one change where the new guy is in and we don't have approval. There's a foreclosure. This deal doesn't work for Wallace Bajali. They lose the hotel. They lose their lease on the hotel. The city still owns it. They lose their lease. There's a foreclosure. Somebody comes in and pays whatever they pay to buy them out. And the new guy, whoever that is, they're in. If there is any other kind of transfer, they just want to sell, they just want to move on. And there are some standards in the agreement that say if you measure up, it's going to be okay. So you have to have our consent, but the consent is effectively built in if you come with a good guy. What happens if this goes bad? What are the default provisions? Well, what we built in here is that Wallace Bajali and Wallace Bajali, on behalf of its tenants, has to maintain these facilities up to those operating standards and perform in accordance with the agreement. So it is their hotel, they're running it, they are automatically incentivized to make it work. If they are too dumb or too incompetent to make it work, it could get so bad that we want to do something about it. It's hard to imagine that happening because they're the ones with all the money at stake. But if it happens, then there are options for us to go forward with exercising remedies to force them to measure up to what they're required to do under the agreement. All the way up to and including termination, but that should never happen. They have a huge asset here, and they're going to want to fix whatever it is that needs fixing. Okay. There are a number of other miscellaneous provisions which I don't think we have to go over and talk about today, but one piece that plays in, you remember that there is an agreement between the city and Wallace Bajali that's been in place for over a year. And the intent is that that agreement gradually disappears as it's replaced with these more specific agreements for what we're actually doing. So insofar as that agreement pertaining to the hotel and the parking garage, that disappears and this takes its place. That agreement still has some life because we still have the MPEV and there's some other parts of the agreement. The idea is as we move forward, get the project built and move on, that agreement will essentially go away and we'll be working with this leasing development. That's an overview of the 72,000 words that are in there.
He's not making that up. There are 72,000
I'm not
words.
making that up. I have a motion to put before the board at the urging of the document review committee. I would move that we authorize the board president to execute the lease and development agreement for hotel and parking garage upon the document committee confirming that the final changes received this morning are consistent with the negotiations previously concluded.
Second.
Okay, you've had a motion and a second. Now's the time for discussion. Questions, discussion from, let's begin with the board, and board members. Comments or questions?
We might note that any action on this item will be under number 4 on the agenda.
That's true. That's true. Let's have discussion, then we'll get back to number 4 for the actual action. Should that be appropriate? Issues, questions, discussion.
Mr. Chairman, or is it President?
President, Mr.
Your Eminence,
Yeah, there you go.
I want to commend this documents committee, which was made up of Gary Pittner and Richard Brown and Glenn Parkey, who's not here today. And I want to say this publicly because I want it to be a matter of record. The time that they have spent in hashing this out with council and with Paul Sandler, who is our special counsel on this project, working with Wallace Bajali, it's just phenomenal. And they've been doing it with no meter running. And there's been times that it's been all day long. So I appreciate that effort and that work and sacrifice, if you will. So I just want to say thank you to the documents committee, and of course now we're fixing to build the wall back in their court to fill in the blanks that are in this lease agreement. So thanks. And job well done.
We'll pay you more.
Yeah, there you go.
Checks in the mail.
Yeah.
Yeah, Richard has done just an outstanding job of laying out the document here this morning. Any particular questions?
Well, I would just like to say, you know, as an elected official, really here to kind of be the public's eyes and ears on behalf of this process. I think that what the public needs to know is this has come back and forth like volleyball with many different versions. And there have been many questions, and Wallace Bajali has been very forthright in saying that there are certain things that they need, and we take exception to some of those, and they've adjusted their views. And I think vice versa applies. And I think the public can be very well reassured that we've looked at this backwards, forwards, up and down, once again, thanks to the Document Review Committee. And I feel very comfortable as a member of the public, having seen this from the inside out, that they are getting exactly what they intended to get in the most efficient manner that I think you could have possibly devised. And I'm very happy with the final document that's come out of this plan. So thank you again.
Okay, I'd like, while we're still on agenda item 3 in terms of the discussion of Richard's presentation here, do members of the public have any comments to make as it pertains to this discussion item that is before the body at this moment? This is an opportunity for you to speak. Mr. Goodrich?
Mr. President, members of the board, is there any interest in having a formal response from the public to these documents? Are you planning to publish them for public review before you act on them, or are you just going to act on them?
Robert, this body has been charged by the Amarillo City Commission to implement the project, and that's what we are doing today with the adoption of, or the consideration of the adoption of the agreement. It is totally consistent with the concepts that have been discussed and were laid out and discussed by the City Commission and by this body going back the last 18 months. So it will be the pleasure of this body ultimately in terms of the action that they might take today. But per the agenda, it is possible for the body to take action today and move forward with the execution of the agreement.
Just, it would be difficult for any interested party to know that it's acceptable, at least to whoever is concerned, without having a chance to review the document. And I just wondered if you were going to publish it for public review or not. Is that your intent, or are you not intending to do that?
Again, it's before the body for consideration today. I mean, the City of Amarillo, in the normal course of business, authorizes the execution of agreements and documents and contracts, and those are certainly not put forward for the public to negotiate, so to speak. This body takes its responsibility, Robert, very seriously, and we have spent a great deal of time, and I think that the group is inclined to move forward with the agreement based upon their knowledge and understanding of what's contained and its consistency, and also the recommendation as it relates to the consistency of this document that we have received from our legal counsel, looking at that very question. Is this document that we're looking at today consistent with the previous actions under the Master Development Agreement, previous actions of the City Commission? And the answer from the attorney is yes.
Well, the reason I ask is always a possibility that some member of the public who's really interested might offer an alternative plan that would be less expensive and less complicated that this board might want to consider. And if you were to issue that kind of an invitation, indicate that that would be welcome, you might be surprised at what you might receive. So, for what it's worth.
Thanks, Robert. Other comments?
Let me ask one question, because the thing that I like about this is, we are approving something today, but there are many checkpoints that come along the way for us to make sure that we're all on the same page. And particularly, I know that as we come to a precursor to starting construction, there are checkpoints on the financial part and that kind of thing. When the facilities are up and running, is there a formal process or informal process to, let's say for some reason something goes from a 4-star to a 3-star or something like that. What triggers that once the facility is up? Obviously we're going to have some approvals here leading up to the construction, but kind of what's going to trigger that when the building is up and running?
There are inspection rights, but there is not built into it a specific, we're going to come check you once every 6 months or once a year or something like that. So it is an operating standard to which they are supposed to adhere, and we have the right to inspect on reasonable notice at any time they want. And it would be the LGC that would be responsible for doing that. How's it really going to happen? We're going to start hearing from the public, that hotel's run down, do something. And then that's what's going to trigger us to go over there and see what's up and talk to Wallace Bajali and say, what about this?
Go ahead.
If I could add just a little bit, exactly as Mr. Brown has said, a few of the other points that are in there. The operator of the hotel must not only have whatever the particular standard is, the 4 Diamond in this case, they must certify to that, and they must maintain the certification throughout the 80 years. And then in my limited knowledge of how the hotel franchising business works, should they not maintain that, you will have a franchisor issue, what we've been calling the flag of the hotel. So we certainly have all of those inspection rights, the audit rights, etc., but there is a positive burden on the operator that must be continually maintained. So.
And if they fail to honor that, then that's an after default agreement, and Mr. Brown reviewed the default provisions. So it is enforceable as the years go on.
The inspection, they're going to be sweating as their flag. And so it's not us, but people who know way better than us what a good hotel ought to look like that's going to be over there grading their paper on the regular basis.
You mentioned an antitrust agreement between Wallace Bajali and this project. What is in place that would there be an antitrust agreement, a non-compete agreement from other sources? What's to prevent another hotel from coming into downtown and competing, and have the antitrust, implications of that been reviewed?
Nothing. We cannot stop someone else from doing whatever they want to. It's America.
I think that only has to do with city land.
And city funded.
City funded. So if somebody wants to come in and put a 5-star hotel right next to them and they can buy that land privately, they can do that.
Yeah, the agreement is that the city will not incentivize, the public sector will not incentivize a comparable facility within a prescribed piece of geography, which is basically the central business district, for 20 years. Yeah,
May I ask for a clarification of what that means? If as a property owner, hotel developer myself, if I come to the city or the Tiers Board and I ask for normally provided support that's been given other property owners, are you telling me that this non-compete clause would prescribe or proscribe my getting, say, Tiers support?
It would be dependent upon your project. If it's a project that is
Privately owned?
Yeah. Do what?
It's privately owned.
No. If it's a project that is comparable, then the city would not be able to participate in incentivizing the project. If it's a project that's not comparable, then certainly it would be up to the decision-making bodies that were controlling those particular incentive tools as to their participation.
If your hotel is redone as condominiums and is not a hotel, it's obviously not a comparable hotel. And so then
Sure.
it doesn't matter. The non-compete doesn't apply.
Well, if it was a smaller hotel with condominiums attached, do you suppose that's going to be interpreted by?
What we're discussing building here is a convention hotel.
Yep.
With 21,000 square feet of configurable meeting room, ballroom space. So it would be something that would be comparable to such. What is the definition of comparability would be a matter to be discussed at that time.
Okay. Well, I'm not interested in building a convention center hotel. That's not my intent. My intent is to improve downtown Amarillo with a rehabilitated, renovated property that will serve our community well, and I'm certainly working hard on that. But I also anticipate we would have good city support since it's revitalizing a good portion of downtown. Thank you.
Other comments? Okay, any additional questions before we actually move to, we'll get back on track here in terms of the agenda. Item number 4 on the agenda would be the consideration of the approval of the Downtown Convention Center lease agreement, parking, hotel and parking garage lease and development agreement. We have a motion on the floor that Richard, do you want to repeat that at this point?
Move to authorize the board president to execute the lease and development agreement for hotel and parking garage upon the document committee confirming that the final changes received this morning are consistent with the negotiations previously concluded.
Mr. Boyd, you seconded that.
Second.
Any discussion regarding the agenda or the motion that is before us?
Question?
Hearing none. Those in favor of the motion indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. The next item on our agenda is item 5, an update on downtown redevelopment projects, and we're pleased to have David Wallace and Joe Esch here with us this afternoon to update us in particular about the items that we have just spent a lot of time discussing and any other issues regarding your work in our partnership.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Richard, I want to thank you for taking a half hour or so to go through the document. Obviously, it took countless hours to actually negotiate the document. I am a little worried as I was listening to you talking about putting the man on the moon. I had no idea we were going to put a launch pad on top of this parking garage. And we'll have to go back and get the HKS and see what we can do. Oh, on top of the hotel. Okay. We'll see what we can do.
I heard just the B-22.
That's all. Fair enough. I personally would like to echo what Commissioner Sims said as well about the document committee, because the three of you, in addition to the city staff, in addition to outside counsel, have put countless hours in connection with this. And at the end of the day, we have a document that I think there was give and take on behalf of everybody, and we have a document that I think all of us feel comfortable with. The dedication that all of you guys put into this thing, good or the meeting on a weekly basis, is beyond words, and I personally would like to thank you. And on behalf of the citizens of Amarillo, I think what has been negotiated is a tremendous economic development project in which we've continued to talk about for a number of months now. Today, with this approval of this document, and then obviously a series of other documents, this is a very complex transaction. I think everybody understands that, which is the reason it took 45 minutes or so for you to go through that. Obviously, I think it moves this project one step closer to reality. We talked about the public-private partnership, and I think the benefits of a public-private partnership for both parties need to outweigh whatever investment has gone into the partnership. In the past, we've stood before this body, we've stood before the commissioners, and basically articulated the economic development benefits as well as the quality of life benefits for the city of Amarillo to realize. We've done market studies, we've done economic impact assessments, all of those things. Those are just as strong today as they were a year ago or 9 months ago, whenever it was that we initially conducted those studies. So once again, I applaud this body for this approval. And again, I think that the citizens of Amarillo should be here to thank you as well for everything. There has been a lot of activity that's been taking place. Much of it, of course, has been in connection with the documentation phase for all these complex documents. On behalf of Wallace Jolly, Joe Esch, as you're aware, has taken the lead in connection with many of these discussions. And I would like to turn it over to Joe to talk about everything from timelines to where we are in connection with the overall process, everything from financing to other components of this. So, Joe, if you wouldn't mind taking the lead on that.
Sure, thank you, Dave. Good afternoon, all. I was going to say good morning, but it's now afternoon. As we all know, the documentation phase has taken the majority of our time, because as we move forward with the other aspects of the project, the ability to describe to the financial institutions, to the investors, to the other potential partners what the transaction really looks like, they need to be able to look at the document. We've continued discussions with those partners, and we've had a number of discussions with folks in the new market tax credits, with folks at Civitas, to make sure that they've maintained their interest in the project and have looked at how they can continue to work with us going forward. We've also reached out to other individuals that would be development partners as we look at the other aspects of the development, which might include.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Try to do that without interrupting.
No, I'm sure it's purely intentional. He was so graceful about it. He was graceful. He didn't interrupt the thing, did he?
No. And I won't even miss my train of thought. So we have discussed with folks in the retail industry. This morning we had some folks in from multifamily development. As you'll recall, the whole focus of this effort is to revitalize the downtown area, to be a catalyst to take advantage of the retail that could be placed on the ground floor of the parking garage, take a look at what other properties are in and around the downtown that we would like to see investment privately that has nothing to do with the public inducements, but can take advantage of the assets that are being put in place. We've also been working with the city and looking at the Amarillo Sox and then Southern Baseball to make sure that they, where they sit, keep them informed as the ADC and the city move forward on working with Coca-Cola and looking at that site. So there's been a number of things that have occurred outside this, but really this is a very important day. As we move forward, the next steps really are to take the other incentive documents that Mr. Brown alluded to and get those approved. And then these documents will also be reviewed and commented by those various financial institutions as we discussed. Those folks need to make sure that they all work for them. I believe that we've been able to craft language in the documents that is reflective of their needs to make sure that everything works. But we also want to make sure once they've seen the documents that Dave asked me to put together said, okay, where do we go from here and how does that look going forward? Well, there's a draft schedule here that you'll notice it does not have a date. The reason it doesn't have a date is because it's predicated on the idea that we need to get to the point of many of the lease commitment triggers saying, these things happen, leases continue, we've got our funding, things are going forward. At that point, everything starts rolling out. Before you focus on it and say, my goodness, take a look at the length of time that is involved there, I thought we were looking at something shorter, I will tell you that the schedule has a lot of room for improvement and compaction. It is not intended to say this is the shortest schedule. It's intended to say, hey, in a worst case scenario, what could you be looking at? It includes in there many of the aspects of review that Mr. Brown talked about, where at each step, whether it's the selection of a construction manager at risk, which lists 20 weeks, that could be done ultimately in 8 to 10. Depends on how fast we're able to move that together. But what we did not want to do is come in here and put the public side in a compacted schedule that put them in a situation that made them uncomfortable. So as we move forward with this, it gives plenty of time for review and also starts that review prior to the conclusion of a different phase. So there's input being received from the public prior to the completion of each one of the phases. Each one of those reviews, be it the LGC approval of schematic design and budget confirmation, or further on down design documents and budget confirmation, from schematic to full design, it's about an 8-week period. It also has, from the schematic design to the design documents, there is room in there so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we have under-projected the amount of time that is allocated. This is a snapshot, and it will be refined again as the documents move forward. As we get to that point, we'll have a better idea of the schedule. One of the things we want to do, though, we have not seen, from a change in economy standpoint, we have not seen upward pressure on pricing. And the city has looked at some of the projects they've had underway, and they have not seen any pressure there. Don't know that will stay this way, but to make sure that we maintain vigilance on the costing, one of the things that we're going to look to do is to make sure we bring on the contractor at the same time we start, or around both at the same time we're starting schematic design. That way, the contractor and the architect are working together to maximize the input of the contractor and minimize the cost of the project. It was mentioned earlier that the MPEB is a very important component. The parking garage is an important component. It's important that all of this get developed because, as you'll recall from the presentations starting almost a year ago, when Civitas looks at the ability to bring EB5 funds to the table, they look at the impact, the jobs that are created, and they look at the total construction jobs from the overall project. And so if they just look at the hotel, that's one set of dollars. They look at the larger project, that's a different set of dollars. And the project is predicated on the idea that there are additional benefits that can be received from ensuring that the entire project gets built. The other elements that are in the way where we've taken these, we've already provided these documents to our operators, and we're finalizing, or are in the process of finalizing operating agreements, and there we're going to be working with the franchise agreement with the Wyndham Hotel folks. We have provided a draft agreement with the architect to the city. That has not been a focus of review at this point. We continue to get this document done. I know that would be something that I would assume the document committee would be looking at in the near term to give us feedback. We have a process that has already been received feedback from the city on the CMR selection approval process. And we're looking forward to hearing more about the opportunities to see that. I don't think I've missed anything. I think that kind of covers where we're at, and we're looking forward to taking these documents and getting them the appropriate folks for them to start reviewing and kickstart this effort.
I have a question. On our side, we've got to go get the documents we know we need to get, but we've already done our homework on all this organization. We don't think that's going to take very long. From your side, the principal thing that has come to cause this whole timeline to flow is to get the approval of your lender or lenders going forward. At this point, when would you estimate that you would be coming back to us with that piece?
You know, it's just the same reason I didn't put months here. I don't have a date for you because as soon as I give you a date on that, that item, I want to see what their comments are going to be. They're going to go in front of them, and we're going to take it the same way that we took these projects. We want to give them adequate time to review and give us feedback and give you feedback as we move through the process. And so that's why I didn't put a date here, is we're going to start immediately. And we already have started. We've had numerous conversations. We've provided them the documents. We're going to provide them the information that the document has been approved. And we're going to come back with you with their feedback as to when they believe they would have a formal commitment and the questions they have.
Weeks or months?
I've answered the question as I'm comfortable answering.
Other questions? David, Joe, thank you guys for your work to this point, and we look forward to continuing down the path successfully over the next months and years. Thank you. All right, we are to item number 6 on the agenda, which is the public forum comment period. So we will open that. If there are any comments from citizens on matters directly pertaining to the programs and the activities of the local government corporation outside of those that we have already discussed here today.
Would like to ask, would this body be interested in receiving a proposal that might be a refinement of that which you're considering doing through the contracts that you have reviewed today?
Well, Mr. Goodrich, I think the body has taken action on the agreements that are before us today.
Sure.
You're certainly welcome, I'm sure, as an owner of a piece of property in downtown Amarillo, to pursue whatever avenues you think might be appropriate. Keep in mind that the local government corporation is not a tool or a vehicle with incentive arrangements to offer for it.
Understood.
That's not within our bailiwick. So I would encourage you to do what you think is in the best interest of you as a property owner in terms of pursuing any and all opportunities that might be available.
Well, I'd like to share what the plan I'm thinking of with Wallace Bajoli. It certainly might bless their effort, and that might come back to you as a blessing to the city also. So
Sure, they would visit with you, I'm sure.
I'm sure they will. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, no need for a closed session at this point, all right? We've already taken care of what business needed to be attended to there. Item number 8 is just simply an announcement of our next regularly scheduled meeting date. Our next regular meeting of the LGC board will be June 6, 2012, at our regular time and here in our regular location. Any additional items to come before the body? Hearing none, we will consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you.